town of the good, the bad, and the weird. You either live by the gun, or you die by the sword.
Welcome to The Good, the Bad, and the Weird. I'm Nico.
And I'm Chris. And today we're going to talk about the first Disney movie to ever mention virginity. That's right, Hocus Pocus.
When you said you had an intro, I wasn't expecting that.
Me neither.
But, yeah.
And to celebrate watching Hocus Pocus and the start of proper spooky season, both of us surprised each other with the exact same drink.
Well, to be fair, you weren't planning to bring one, so...
And you never bring one, so congrats. Together, we have 2 containers of apple cider.
But I don't have to bring one, because it's already here.
True.
So, today we are talking about what's become a cult classic and family tradition, as with a lot of people I know, Hocus Pocus.
Yes.
We went with a little more family-friendly before we get into... my pick for Halloween.
Yes, this was definitely hands down my pick for Halloween. But I picked it because despite how absolutely atrociously it did at theaters, which was not entirely its fault.
Nope.
This has easily become like a required watch for a lot of families. Kind of like how Charlie Brown, The Great Pumpkin, is a must-see at the holiday season. Hocus Pocus is on, I think, ABC or whatever it's called now every year. I think they've even added a version that has fun little pop-ups that, like, count the number of candles and stuff and tell you fun facts about the movie while you watch it.
Yeah, and, well, I mean, I've never seen Charlie Brown, so
I am painfully aware.
my Halloween choices are this, and then jumps right into Alien.
Yes. Well, and Hocus Pocus was one of those movies that it definitely has scenes that it does the Disney line with where the adults are going to find something that is humorous but flies right over a kid's head. And so you feel fine letting your children watch a movie where 3 fully grown women are hit on by a bus driver. Yeah,
well, and this one's kind of a weird one too because it's not like some of the other Disney movies where they just straight up ignore a lot of stuff, or it's subtle. This stuff is right in your face. Like it's not subtle in the least.
No. And on top of that, this is one of the few movies that people put strongly in the Disney Halloween category that doesn't immediately terrify most small kids. I know a lot of people who, when they first watched Nightmare Before Christmas, it gave them they were scared of that. And then the other one, the Headless Horseman, Ichabod Crane.
Yeah, Ichabod and Mr. Toad.
Yeah. I know lots of kids who, with their first watch through that, also spooked them pretty good. And then my honorary mention of the Halloween Disney Vault, Black Cauldron, easily the scariest bad guy that Disney has ever rendered in its life. Terrifying.
Which, unfortunately, my VHS player broke yesterday, and I was not able to even start watching it. So.
That movie's villain is what Skeletor wishes he was.
Well, and I mean, talking about it, I did watch Nightmare Before Christmas as a kid, but I, on the other hand, loved it.
I did too, but I also was friends with people who were scared of things like the trees from, Snow White when she's running through the forest and the people trees are snatching at her.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was friends with people who were scared of that. So, the bar was already low.
Mm-hmm. And the first scary movie for me, I watched Jurassic Park really young.
Good one.
3 or 4 when I watched it. Maybe
yes.
5. But still.
A good introduction to dinosaurs.
Yes. I actually wanted to be a paleontologist for, my first profession.
If paleontology was like that, I think I would also put up with the history part of paleontology.
Yeah, it's a good thing I didn't, because I can't see the difference between the rocks sometimes.
I forget you're colorblind on a daily basis.
Yes. It's fun.
It is. So this movie... there was a really good term for it. It's when you take a horrible situation, and it has been so long ago now that we have now turned it into fun times and mascotti. So this whole movie is based around the Salem Witch Trials, which is hilarious because if you kind of look at the dates that this movie gives, I think that these witches were after the Salem Witch Trials were over. So, you know.
But at the same time, well, that's the thing, is the big Salem Witch Trials, from what I was reading, there was like 2 major ones.
Yes.
And then after that, there were little spurts of like, oh, this person's a witch, but there was never the mass hysteria that...
Gotcha. So maybe, you know, maybe they are somewhat historically accurate with their ridiculous witches.
Which was kind of the thing that I was thinking was like really weird in the movie, is that this whole area is obsessed with these 3 witches when there was 25 people who died in the original Salem Witch Trials.
Well, and I also thought it was interesting because while most of this film was not filmed on an actual site, it was mostly filmed on a set. A couple of places are filmed, I think, in Salem, Massachusetts, and then like a couple graveyard scenes from other places nearby. Salem has fully embraced its witch culture. Like, I think the elementary school mascot is a witch, maybe? I don't know, one of the school mascots is a witch.
It's like Whitetown, Snowtown in Australia, where that dude murdered... He was a vigilante and he murdered a bunch of people and started dissolving their bodies in barrels. They have magnets that say, come to Snowtown. It's barrels of fun.
Yes. Maybe, I mean, yeah, a little less raw and recent. But from what I can tell, I've not been to Salem. It is definitely on my bucket list. But Salem seems to have fairly well embraced the witchiness of their culture. So it was kind of interesting that this movie chooses to only focus on 3 witches. Potentially the only 3 actual witches of Salem.
That we know of.
And I also liked, and this is just a personal thing, because witches are probably one of my favorite, like, magic creatures, if you want to, like, put them in a category.
Yeah.
So they chose to blatantly ignore some witch culture and lore, but heavily emphasize other witch culture and lore. For no reason, other than it fit that version of the cut.
Yeah, and even then, like, looking at my basic understanding of how some of the ritual and magic works, is a lot of it is personal. And so that's where that could potentially come into play, is that this is their own personal style of, like, this is why this one can shoot lightning and this one... Well, here's the thing. So when I was rewatching it, I realized Winifred is a pet owner.
She is a pet owner.
Her one sister is a promiscuous cat.
Yeah.
And the other is a dog.
Yeah, there are definitely times in this movie where I do feel bad for Winifred. Her siblings must be somewhat of a burden to deal with on the very, like, everyday basis.
But you take care of them because they're family.
Yes. Which apparently, I listened to the synopsis of the book that came out for Hocus Pocus 2, which is in the works. Theoretically. Maybe.
They've said that for as long as I can remember.
I know. But at least the book is now published.
Yeah.
And so, apparently, there is more to the sister lore, and that's what the second one, or at least the book, is leaning towards and based off of. So maybe we will finally understand why her other 2 sisters are so...
special.
Yeah. And she's fairly normal as far as witch standards, especially if you disconnect witch culture in those who currently consider themselves practicing witches and the Europeanized idealistic magical creature that is witches.
Yeah. Well, and I really wanted to get into it. Unfortunately, my book on the history of witchcraft came in yesterday evening, so I did not get to that. I ended up staying up, starting to rewatch Neon Genesis Evangelion again.
Fair. That's a good one to rewatch. I do say that this, especially for Disney, who is notorious for ripping off other ideas and just Disneyfying it, I really liked that the idea for this one came from I gotta make sure this is right, the producer, not the director. Those different people.
Yes.
The producer originally would tell his daughters a similar story about the black cat, which then turned into Thaddeus Speaks. the strange cat with a weird lisp that none of us realized was named Thaddeus.
Thackeray. Because I thought he was Zachary.
I think everyone and their mom thought his name was Zachary until us deaf people brought in some subtitles.
Except my mom. I was talking to my mom about it, and she's like, "No, it's Thackeray. They meant there's like a gravestone or something that has his name on it at some point."
The details your mom catches in movies always absolutely amazes me. Because no one in our group realized that his name was Thackeray, except for Crystal and I. And the only reason we know it is because we both watch movies with the subtitles on.
Yes. I'll rewatch with subtitles, but most of the time the first watch through I don't, so.
I mean, I understand. It's very distracting, but if I didn't have him on, I would have no idea what's going on most of the time. But, so apparently this overarching story was about this black cat who was originally a boy, and the witches from Salem had turned him into a black cat. And so that's where the whole story evolved from, which I really like.
Yeah.
I like the originality of it. It definitely feels its own. The witches aren't a blatant ripoff of anything that I can find. I mean, they're definitely an amalgamation of stuff, but... You know, they're witches.
Yeah, that's the thing. You pull from different lore and you make it your own.
Definitely. And, like, there's definitely every element of Halloween shoved into this movie physically possible. We've got the weird adult party where everyone's dressed kind of oddly, which I've never been to an adult party where anyone has dressed like Madonna.
No, normally it's you guys come over and I put on my Wicker Man hat.
Yes, it's a very impressive hat. And even the, like, more put-together parties where it is a large group of people that I've been to for Halloween, like, we're doing good to get half the population in costume.
Yeah.
And most of those are bought from Walmart the day before. So, like, this is a very impressive party. The trick-or-treating is heavily put into the movie, even though it's not really much of a plot point other than for the bullies who aren't really necessary.
No, I mean, they're...
Other than being hilarious.
Well, they do serve a very small purpose. They add to Max's, or the main character, Max.
Yes.
They add to his strife of moving as a teenager.
Speaking of which, so when Max moved, our entire group simultaneously busted a gut because he throws a temper tantrum about moving to what to us as recent adults have recognized as a fabulous house. Downtown, he's getting this, like, 90s kid dream bedroom with a weird loft thing.
He has a Hellraiser skateboard in the background.
He has his own drum kit in his room with, like, a loft thing and staircases in his, like, attic room. It is everything. Like, I would have dove states away for this bedroom as a child.
I would have loved the fact that I was just moving to Salem, but
and he's moving to Salem, and I think at some point he says something about moving to, like, a hodunk town or something. Honey, Salem is not a hodunk town by any means.
But at the same time, he's from Los Angeles, so his definition of a city is different.
I feel like if you grow up in Los Angeles, you surely have to recognize that literally everywhere else is not Los Angeles, and you're not going to get close. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. No. And...
Like, I understand being upset about your friends, but his temper tantrum happens in the most inconvenient point for adults watching, because all of us are like, oh, boo-hoo, you poor privileged child.
Yeah. Well, and I have a different background. I was a military kid, so...
Yeah, your moves were different than I think a lot of our moves were.
I was moving since I was in, actually, a year and a half. So.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I can understand that, because I went to school with people who hated moving because they made friends and then they left them. But...
Sure, I feel like if his temper tantrum had happened and, like, he just went upstairs and closed his bedroom door like a teenager that he's supposed to be, I think the humor probably would not have happened. It was just the fact that it happened while showing off his magnificent room and his magnificent house and his magnificent new town.
Yes.
That us as Midwesterners cannot even fathom. Especially young adult Midwesterners who, like, all of us are like, boy, sure wish there was a house for, like, $100.
Yeah.
So,
well,
that was fantastic.
So, not only do the bullies add to his turmoil, but they actively confront him when he's with his sister, and that leads them to the front of Allison's house.
Fair. I suppose that is true.
Yeah, so, I mean, they feel, after that point, I feel they're not needed.
No, but putting them in a cage and poking them with a stick was hilarious.
Poking them with a trident.
The small trident. I will say that Max's one great character flaw, which I understand why, because he is supposed to be a teenage boy, and, like, that's the mindset, you know, revenge is revenge. He definitely leaves these two boys to just die a horrible death.
Yeah. No, it ends with them just chilling there.
Hanging out in their cages in an abandoned museum that no one's gonna come find them in.
Singing, row, row, row your boat.
I mean, they were doing a good job, but,
yeah.
like, these poor children.
Well, so, talking about, like, how adult and kind of weird this movie is.
Yeah.
We mentioned while we were watching it that we would love to see this redone as, like, a grittier version.
Yeah, like a proper... Like the horror movie Trick or Treat, that sort of tone, but with the characters of this movie.
Yes.
That'd be so good.
Well, so when I was rewatching it, I like how mature Danny is, like, in the movie. Like, the stuff she knows. Because she's 8 years old. I mean, she might know the terms, but she might not understand what they mean.
She is throwing around a lot of big words for an 8-year-old.
Well, I thought, when I was rewatching it, they go to Allison, and she's like, oh, my brother likes, what do you call them? Your yabos? And I had this thought in my head, like, how weird would that be, like, if she was, like, an older man, like, hey, my brother, he likes your tits.
Yes. And, like, I understand, like, some of her lines do make sense, because, like, I used to watch little kids, and they will repeat anything that they have heard, especially if they think it's going to embarrass a sibling. It doesn't matter what they heard. They will tell your crush, so that way you are thoroughly embarrassed. So her lines, for the most part, do make sense, but they were definitely written with the understanding of all of those words, and then given to a child who hopefully knows none of them.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, some of the lines hit the way they want, like the titty scene. And then some of them, like her confrontation with the fake police officer later on, where she's explaining why her brother is the horrible child that he is for bringing back the witches.
He was in LA and he's still a virgin.
So, you know, some of these lines she says, I think maybe the innocence was lost a little tiny bit.
No, she goes up to her mom. So, my brother Max, he's a virgin. He lit the black flag candle, and now the Sanderson sisters are here. It's like...
Yes, also
good thing to tell your mom. Hey, I know my brother's a virgin.
Also, like, if Max hadn't died from witches, he would have definitely died from embarrassment for running into his mother dressed as Madonna at a costume party. I would have keeled over. And
honestly, up until a few years ago, I didn't know what the costume was.
Yeah.
I thought she said, I don't know.
Well, and I think you're probably not the only one, because as much as Madonna's music is still loved and appreciated, I don't think maybe the visuals and costumes of Madonna have been quite as well kept as her music.
No.
So there is we are rapidly reaching a point where no one is going to know who the Rocket Tits lady is supposed to be, other than maybe, like, didn't Katy Perry have a costume kind of like that?
Oh, yeah, she had the...
I don't remember what music video that was.
It was the cupcake cotton candy one. She had whipped cream coming out of her.
Yeah. So, like, we are rapidly approaching the era where she is going to be mistaken for someone else, which that's kind of scary that there's that many people with this similar costume.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like 2 is too many. Madonna was plenty.
Yeah.
Especially since I like Madonna quite a lot. I love her music. It's a lot of costume, especially for a high school boy to run into his mom in.
High school girl to run in first.
A high school girl to run into.
No, not even high school girl. 8-year-old daughter.
An 8-year-old daughter, high school boy, and then his high school crush, who is now never going to let him forget that. Nope. Everyone at school will now know.
But see, conflict brings people together. They are in a relationship that will last now because they killed 3 witches together.
If I hadn't already read the synopsis of the second book, I would have a witty combat for you, but...
Is that what they do? Yes!
I believe the sequel is supposed to follow their child.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I'm not mad at it. I do think it's kind of funny that we couldn't have found another character to like throw in and be like, yeah, they dated for a while, but it didn't work out because they're high school kids and now they dated this other person. This is their child. But I see why Disney picked to do that. And like, if you read the whole synopsis, like it does make sense.
It ties into the nostalgia too that, you're the adult. Now the people who grew up watching this are now having kids, and
that's definitely part of it. And then they also do play off of the idea of like, or at least the overarching idea of like the European witches, where it's like a curse that's passed down through bloodline. So they're playing with that idea a little bit. So if we have a recurring character who dealt with witches the first time, sure, it's a lot easier to bring this idea about.
Yes. Because they leave the movie with the book opening up its eye.
Yes.
So that's creepy to begin with.
The book is by far the scariest part in this movie.
But why does she have the salt line in it when it's a book that's she's supposed to use to curse other people, not give other people protection against her?
Well, again, I haven't read the whole book, but the synopsis didn't cover that.
No.
It does cover a new magic artifact, because of course there has to be a new one. And it covers the new characters and all that. So maybe this will be addressed. I will say, however, I question her salt circle drawing abilities. We watched her dance a salt circle, and all of us busted a gut, especially those of us who were Supernatural fans and are very used to watching people deliberately draw circles of salt, where she's just hula hooping this salt everywhere.
Yeah, like what is the concentration of salt do you actually need around you?
I feel like it needs to all be touching. I feel like all the granules, like you need like a solid line of salt for it to count, right? I don't know. I don't know that much about like. I don't know about witches either. Like I have heard of the salt thing for supernatural spirits, usually ghosts and poltergeists, but I don't know if witches count.
Yeah. In
that circle. We all did make a good laugh about the idea of potentially the salt not working. Or the idea of that she had grabbed the wrong
which would be a
salt.
great thing to do, because like, hey, you mislead them, I can do whatever I want still.
Which would have been hilarious. And then also the concept of like they just happen to have a very full container of salt in their home, which is very convenient because every time I need salt, even though I do buy the exact same large container, it is always empty. And I don't know why.
I think Philip and Erica got you.
Probably. That or I am way over salting my pasta water.
Well, I actually had a weird thought last night. I was watching The Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price.
Yes.
And I will say, they are definitely more vampire-like, but I can see where the zombies came from, because they're not sexy vampires. They're just kind of like shambling corpses.
Yes, and I feel like it's the corpse aspect that throws them a little bit farther away from the vampire.
So, here's my question. What if I made a ring of garlic powder or garlic salt?
Garlic salt would protect you indefinitely, I think.
Yes.
Especially if you, like, managed to get a hula hoop and filled it with holy water and garlic salt and just, like, held it around you. I think you're good. I think you're safe.
Awesome. No one sucks my blood.
I will say that this movie does have some fun with the witch's powers, because we're not stuck to just Jedi lightning. We do get to resurrect a character who is giving the briefest backstory of all backstories, which I absolutely love his backstory. He was a lover for Winifred, the smart witch.
Yes.
Caught with cat substitute witch.
I actually don't, other than Winifred, I don't remember the other two.
I don't remember their names either. I've just always called them Dog Witch, Cat Witch, and Winifred. I'm so sorry, Jessica Parker's witch. But he's caught with that witch. But what I want to understand and know is what possessed him to like any of them. Like, and it wasn't, like, they made it sound like, oh, it wasn't a one-time fling that he didn't know they were witches. They made it sound like he was actively dating Winifred.
Sometimes you get what you can get.
I guess it was rougher times back then.
I mean, they're in colonial Salem at some point.
Yeah,
your stock of people's kind of limited.
Yeah, I guess your definition of what's a good date might be different back then, huh? But I will say, so they bring him back, and this is supposed to be like, what, 300 years after these were murdered? So he has been dead for at least 300 years and buried in the ground. He looking real good for 300 years dead.
But at the same time, she's a witch.
True.
She could have cursed him.
I was kind of hoping for natural mummy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he just happened to be buried in just the right
like
spot.
Like a swamp bog or a peat.
Yeah, he wasn't quite bog body level dead, but maybe he was getting his way there. And I kind of hope that he, like, can return to his grave, continue being an awesome mummy, and, like, later we can dig him up and be like, wow, mummy! American mummy!
Because he goes back to sleep. Like,
he does.
That was the thing we were questioning, because, like, and this is one of the things that doesn't make sense for their magic system.
Yes.
Their curse ends when she dies.
Yes.
Did her saying that we'll be back in 300 or in so many hundred years that they're not technically dead, and that's why Thackeray was still alive?
So I think the loophole with this will hopefully be addressed in the upcoming sequel, because you were not the only person to notice this. Yeah. I think this loophole with, like, the book still functioning, we're not guaranteed that Zombie Boy is dead. We're just kind of put to the idea that he's back to sleep and could be resurrected again.
They just go to his grave. Hey, buddy! Hey, wake up! Wake up! Remember that time we killed witches? Hey, let's go have some fun.
Like, so we're not given a guarantee that this guy is, like, 100% definitely dead. So he could be coming back.
But Thackeray's dead.
We would like to think Thackeray is very dead. But at the same time, the witches were very dead, and they were brought back. So I think the hopeful sequel is going to address some of this a little bit better than the first one did, because the first one definitely left the magic system in the realm of which is kind of where Disney leaves most of its magic systems. Yeah,
but is Disney still doing it? Because I thought Amazon was going to make it into a TV show now.
I didn't get a solid source for who's currently attempting to do what.
Yeah.
I have a hard time believing that Disney will willingly give up Hocus Pocus, because they do show it every year on ABC, which they also own.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I think they own ABC, don't they?
They own a lot of stuff, which...
at this point, you know who owns everything? Whoever owns all the chips. So, Johnson & Johnson and Disney. Like, that's who... I'm pretty sure that's everybody right there.
Illuminati.
Disney.
Aliens.
Yeah, maybe. I have no proof. But, so I would be surprised if Disney gave up the rights for the sequel, especially now that it is a cult classic. And they tend to, once something becomes a cult classic, kind of hold on to it real hard.
Yeah.
But we'll see, especially since this one did flop atrociously when it first came out.
And on top of that, Disney's become a lot more PG with their titles, I would say.
Yeah, they definitely have been recently. Though that's kind of a fun argument you could have with whether or not all of the remakes are for fun PC good times, or if because the licenses are about to run out and they don't want to have to give up Dumbo.
Yeah.
So we'll see. It'll be very interesting to see who puts it out, if it ever actually gets made. I know the original cast have very verbally said that they are very interested in coming back as the witches. So I'm hoping for it. I think it'd be a fun remake, especially since, like, my Disney Halloween collection is pretty low. I watch Halloween Town, all three of them, every year. They're not great, but I love them.
Yeah, and I don't know. Disney's just always been this weird, well, and more so times, it's been this weird, touchy subject of, like, are they actually going to make something good? Especially, like, when they acquired Star Wars and Marvel. Yeah. Marvel's done very well from what I've seen, because I'm not a superhero fan, but I do enjoy their movies for the most part.
I will say that the reason why I'm hoping that Disney gives this a second shot is because they have seen that this quirky style of movie can do well. Because when this first came out, first off, I always assumed this came out in October because it's a Halloween movie. It did not. Who is in charge of this?
You want to know why?
Because Nightmare Before Christmas was coming out the same year. Who planned this? This is horrible planning.
But this is back, like, I remember, like, when I was a kid, like, we didn't go out to movies a lot. We rented a lot of VHSs.
Same. But, like, surely, like, they could think to themselves, oh, we've got these two great movies. How about we hold one for next year and release it in October so that kids can go to the movie theater? release them both, because I would argue that Nightmare Before Christmas is arguably a little bit too scary for in theater for some kids.
But at the same time, now you have two money makers. I mean, of course, it's divvying funds, but it's still, it would
have done better than it did.
Yes.
Well, and so it came out in, I think, June or July.
Yeah.
So, like, in the middle of summer, which, why? Who does that? It was kind of odd also for the trailers, because the trailers have, I don't know if you hate trailers, so I doubt you saw this.
I'll watch trailers after the fact, but... So
there's entire scenes that were in the trailers that had been cut from the movie. At one point, the sisters all go to a grocery store, and that was left in the trailer, and it's nowhere in the movie. They completely cut it.
That was one thing we talked about, too, is, like, this weird, they're very archaic in their talk, but they know what a driver's permit is.
Yeah, that confused me greatly. I kind of hoped that maybe out of the cutscenes, one of the scenes was, like, them going to the library and, like, quickly researching or something. Because it starts off very adorable with them being scared of the road and tarmac and very afraid of police officers, which, I mean, you dress like that on Halloween.
No, they were afraid of firemen. They were
afraid of firemen because they were definitely witch hunters coming to get them.
Which is...
I mean, it's fair.
Cute. It's a cute take on
it. It is
stuff.
so cute. And then they lose it really fast.
Yeah. Which, that was another thing, too. Sarah Jessica Parker's witch, she's killing stuff constantly.
She is. Like, she is by far the highest kill count of all of them. Nom nom nom.
She is a cat.
Probably. That would make a lot of sense. So I feel like this movie was set up to fail from the beginning, and then after... And I think at the time, critics really hated it, from what I could read. Which
it was heavily panned, because they all thought, like, it has some moments, but it's
not good. A lot of them thought it was, like, pandery. A lot of them thought the jokes weren't going to hit. And I feel like at this point, if you're a critic judging a Disney movie... At this point, if it's a bad Disney movie, just automatically assume that someone's going to absolutely love it. Yeah. And it's just going to become a cult classic in 20 years.
Unless it's Song of the South.
No, that still has a following.
Oh, yeah, a different kind of following.
Yeah, and that's partially because they did hide it in the vault. But, I mean...
Or the fact that Disney did World War II propaganda.
I mean...
That stuff's getting harder and harder to find. Like, I remember not that long ago, I could go on YouTube and find Donald Duck as a Nazi in their propaganda.
Yeah.
And they have, like, that's been almost completely scrubbed from YouTube now.
Yeah, they have definitely learned what YouTube is and are trying much harder on that. But even, like, bad movies that I know they own, like Halloween Town, which is arguably not a good movie. I wouldn't even say arguably. It's not. It's not a good movie. But there's an entire host of us who will rewatch it every single year for Halloween. And it's not a small group of people.
No.
Like, if it's enough people that you feel comfortable putting on the TV for other people to watch, you might be onto something.
I know a handful of people here because of you who will do that every year.
Yep, definitely.
And then I shut myself in and watch Cannibal Holocaust.
Yes. The other thing that's kind of, I don't know, oddball for this one was the way it ends. It does have like a happily ever after sort of ending, but there's a lot of stuff that just is written off as, oh, that was a fun night. Like all of the adults leaving their dance party where they've now been dancing for hours. And none of them were like, wow, it's daytime. That was a long party.
I drank way too much. Someone spiked the punch.
Yeah, so... But, I mean, I don't think when this movie was made, they were looking at it as the next big hit.
No.
Which is kind of too bad because from what I've heard from the people who were in the movie, from their interviews, it sounded like they all had an absolute blast making it.
It's kind of like The Princess Bride. The VHS culture, movie rental culture, let this movie pass around.
Definitely.
And I think, honestly, we've kind of lost that a little bit. We have Netflix a little bit where like people are like, oh, you should watch this movie. But at the same time, I haven't got around to watching like Bleach. And people keep saying, oh, you need to see it. It's really good.
Yeah, same.
It's it's
such not high on my list to do.
Well, not even that. It's just a different experience. Back when you used to be able to rent movies at a Blockbuster, it was an event. You would take the Friday to go rent the movie, come home, eat dinner, pop the popcorn, watch the movie.
And then you only had a couple of days to watch it because you had this ticking time bomb. And we kind of have a similar thing with the red boxes, but not gonna lie, because they're so convenient, I don't have that sense of urgency. I've been meaning to watch Detective Pikachu since it came out, and I have not gotten around to it. There's literally a red box within walking distance of my home. Have yet to go watch it.
And I've never used a red box.
It's very convenient.
I
feel you, though.
There's one on my way home, but I've got a selection of stuff to watch at home that I could easily go through.
Definitely. And I also think that we've also reached a point where, and this is kind of too bad because a lot of my favorite movies are these VHS blockbuster sort of things where it wasn't popular when it came out. No one would have seen it in theaters. But now that it's out and everyone owns a copy of it, I watch it all the time. And I feel like we're kind of losing that. Because, trailers are not as much of a thing, which I think is part of the reason why this movie, people will come back for it. Because this was a trailer that would have played on other VHS tapes that you rented. And that was how I always found what I wanted to watch next. Well, now all of the... By the way, your Blu-ray discs don't work at my house.
They don't?
No, because I plugged it into my PS3, which isn't attached to the internet, and it beeped at me really loudly.
Oh, it's...
Because it wants to autoplay the newest trailers.
Yeah. Which movie was that?
I don't remember. One of the ones you lent us.
Huh. Yeah, no, I noticed that too.
It only plays new trailers, which, I mean, is all fine and dandy, but I don't want to watch trailers for new movies. I want to watch the ones that I forgot I wanted to see.
Yeah, my Hitchcock collection does that, and it's like, a movie about teenagers dancing to win the high school festival has no relation to what I want to watch.
Well, and part of the joy of, the Blockbuster thing, too, was now that I have all these old VHS tapes, I will purposefully not fast forward through the commercials because I get to sit there and go, oh, Flubber was a movie. I hated Flubber.
Apparently Flubber was a remake, too.
I didn't know that.
I just learned that recently, too.
Apparently we need to put Flubber on the list. But, Space Jam, that commercial would come out because it didn't cost them anything to put it on the VHS tape preview because they assumed everyone was going to skip it and kind of, oh, no, whatever. Or one of my VHS tapes at the end of it has a short with Helga the Witch, who is hands down my favorite Warner Brothers scary person. Character in general, really. And so there's an entire cartoon after the movie. Yeah. You don't get that anymore.
Same with my collection of Star Wars. I got the gold box edition or whatever, but there's whole interviews in the beginning about here's what we did to the movie, and when I learned Lucas is full of shit.
Well, so that was kind of missed, but I don't know. This movie definitely holds up. And I would say that part of the reason it holds up, and this was before I started researching this movie, so Google had yet to learn my interest in this movie, because Google is always watching. But before that, there was a bunch of people who had done Halloween mashup songs, and Come Little Children was one of the mashup songs, which that has to say something when your music is iconic enough to get put in an a cappella group's mashup for Halloween stuff. Fun, interesting bit about the music, because I love music for movies. So the music was all done by, and I'm going to mess everyone's name up, I'm so sorry, John Debney. And he was unfortunately not their first pick. The first pick was James Horner, who was going to do it and then had to drop last minute, which means all of the music for this was written in 2 weeks.
Oh, wow. I did not realize that.
Me neither. The only exception to that was James did come back to write the song Come Little Children, which if you're music buff or even really into soundtracks, you can tell that song was written by someone else. It is beautiful. It is haunting. It has nothing to do with the rest of the music.
But at the same time, it kind of fits, though.
Oh, it totally fits. It's just, you can tell that it was put in by someone else, but it kind of works because it's only sung by, I think her name's Sarah.
Yes, that is her name. We gotta find the other one's name. I can't
I
keep
don't-
calling them
Dog Witch and
Witch.
Cat Witch. So Cat Witch Sarah is the only one who sings this, and because she is by far the most oddball of the three, because even the other sister does have arguably more spoken lines and acts, yeah, she's a very dog-like character.
Mary.
Mary, that's it.
Because they're such regular names compared to Winifred.
Do you want me to spoil the name of the new sister?
There's a new sister?
Yeah. She has the most boring name ever.
How many people are you gonna piss off?
Oh, all of them. It's too late, though.
What's her name?
Elizabeth. How silly is that?
I have
None
a cousin.
of them have scary names.
I have a cousin Elizabeth, and my mom's middle name's Elizabeth.
Oh, good. Well, now they can join the cult. But because she's the only one who sings Come Little Children, it makes that song much more memorable. Because while the music for Hocus Pocus is fantastic, with the exception of the Broadway style song and the Come Little Children song.
There's a Broadway version of this?
No.
Oh.
So her getting up on stage and like singing it has feels of the Broadway style. And because they break of all of the other styles, that one gets its own little haha. That's what you are. Ooh, fun fact about that song. So when she gets up on stage and she says something like, "Hi Salem, I'm Winnie, what's your name?" So that's ripped off of another musical that she starred in the same year that this was. I don't remember the exact line. I think the only thing that changed is the name. I think her character's name is Rose in that musical. It's a good musical. She did a great job in it.
Yeah.
But that I had never caught that, even though I'd seen both of these several times.
And I had no clue.
Yeah, you're not into musicals like the rest of us.
I mean, I do like musicals. I was in theater, and
Yeah.
the first thing I participated in was Les Mis.
Fair. Oh, Les Mis was your first one? Mm-hmm. I'm so sorry.
We actually had a rotating stage, and there was a lot of cool stuff we did.
It's just so hard to sing.
I was a stage guy.
There you go.
I was one of the people moving the props in all black.
There you go.
I
makes much more sense.
I was a more behind-the-scenes theater person.
I was going to say, you on theater, I would have paid good money. I have no doubt that you would have gotten all your lines right.
I did what I did.
Good for you.
I was on stage for one play.
I am way too shy to have been on stage. I got my lines wrong in one small, skit that we did for Girl Scout camp.
I was almost bullied into it.
True theater kid style.
Well, so I already was going to be doing sound or something for them, because I think this one was our community theater's like all high school play. And I said, I don't have time with soccer and calculus because I was having a hard time.
Same.
But the guy told he had something else that was conflicting with like the competition show.
Yes, that does take priority over your soccer.
Well, I ended up dropping soccer that year to focus on calculus.
Fair.
Which
yeah,
I improved quite a bit, but
maybe I would have improved at calculus if I had also dropped soccer.
Well, he told the director, well, you know what? Tough shit. Nothing you can do about it. And so he got kicked out of the show.
Bummer.
And I kind of got bullied, like, hey, we really need you to do this. And I'm like, all right, fine. And I think I had like 2 weeks to learn my lines. It wasn't a big part, but...
Hey, that's still pretty impressive.
Yeah. But, yeah, I prefer the more backstage stuff.
Fair. Same. I prefer watching them.
But no, I do love musicals. I actually got to see Wicked.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Wicked was awesome live. And it was at the Orpheum in Omaha, which has like this really decorative border.
That is one of my favorite theaters in the Midwest to go watch stuff at.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It is. It is a fun theater to go visit.
Anywho. Back to Hocus Pocus. I like rewatching it. I'm still amazed like how dark some of it is and how Disney's able to make light of it.
Definitely.
In the beginning when they have the toe fight, the Deadman's toe fight.
Yes, it's so funny.
How many toes do they have?
They had at least 12 toes. At least 2.
Well, if they each have 10 apiece.
Well, they all appear to be big toes though.
Yeah.
There were no picky toes in there. Well, and then the other thing, which, like, it grosses me out every time, but the fact that Sarah Jessica Parker is constantly putting bugs in her mouth in this movie would normally be really disgusting, but because it is this quaint, very strange, childlike woman just shoving bugs in her mouth, it's fine.
You know what? Maybe they're not actually her sisters. Maybe she did the reverse of what she did to Max. Maybe she is a cat and her other sister's a dog.
That would be so funny. That would be good. I don't think so, though.
No.
I think this is just who she's stuck with
No,
for literally eternity.
They both say mother.
They do.
Or they all say mother.
They do say mother. I would like to meet their mom. Their mom sounds like a absolutely terrifying person to have raised these three.
Or maybe she wasn't really there, and that's why they're all kind of dipshits.
Oh, yeah, maybe. Maybe they were all dropped on their heads as children.
Yeah, Sarah definitely.
Sarah definitely. Oh, speaking of Sarah's character, so the actress who played Sarah Jessica Parker. So all of the scenes where they're doing the flying on brooms, mops, random cleaning equipment. Apparently she liked being in the flying harness so much that in between takes, instead of being brought to the ground, she would just bring up newspapers and magazines and read them while still up there.
I mean, that's the closest we get to magic. Like,
well, and you can tell, like, during her shots when she's doing her flying choreography, you can tell she is having the time of her life. Is by far, like, the most free looking she is for the whole movie.
Yeah. No. It's an interesting movie, like, rewatching it. Especially with nostalgia, but also not having that... It's not like rewatching The Princess Bride, where, like...
The goggles are heavy.
Yeah.
The goggles be thick.
Exactly. And I love that people are up in arms of, like, no, you can't remake this.
Yeah.
Don't you dare.
Which does crack me up, because to an extent, like, I can see why people wouldn't want that movie or Hocus Pocus, any of these ones that have gone so long untouched as a cult classic, to not be messed with. Because there's a lot of people who could point to other franchises and say, well, look, you touched that one and look how horrible the sequels came out, looking at you, Jar Jar Binks.
To be fair, episode 1's not terrible.
Oh, I love Jar Jar Binks. I'm so sorry, father-in-law. Like, he's hilarious to me.
Michael,
I am the child he was aimed at.
I liked him too as a kid, but I'm glad the one we got, because Michael Jackson really, really wanted to be Jar Jar.
That would have been gold. Pure gold.
Yeah.
Disappointment.
I'm glad he's not, though, now.
Speaking of famous people, so Max wasn't the guy who ended up playing Max. Apparently he was sick during his audition, and he almost didn't get the role. They were gonna give it to, what's his name? Another very famous person who was the heartthrob of every child in the 90s. Dang it.
DiCaprio?
Actually, yeah. I think it might have been DiCaprio. I don't remember. It was someone else who I remember them saying, oh, it was going to be him. And while, the other person's acting is phenomenal and would have been great, Max's character is so awkward and bumbly for the whole movie that, like, a heartthrob of an actor, I don't think would have been right for Max.
And I think that's kind of the charm of this movie, is you do have big-name actors, but then you have the kids who aren't very well-known, and from what I've seen, they haven't really done a whole lot much else outside of Hocus Pocus.
How dare you, sir?
What?
Max has been on NCIS for ages now.
I don't watch TV shows.
I think it's NCIS. He's on a crime show. And I watch all of them consecutively, and I'm not gonna lie, I spend a lot of time forgetting who's on which show.
So they all blend together.
They real bad.
Do they do crossovers?
They should.
Huh.
I'm sure they have. I don't get to watch them all in sequence because I don't have cable TV.
No.
So, like, I just get to watch little bits here and here where I, like, go to work or, like, when I'm at home with my parents.
And that's actually, you bring that up, that's another good thing about this movie is, like, you can pick it up anywhere, like, at any point and be like, oh, this is on, I'll just keep watching what's left of it.
Yes, which I think is something that's kind of hard to say with newer movies because, like, example, any of the new Marvel movies. If they start on TV, everyone in my family would throw a fit until you rewind the movie all the way back to the start so they can see it from the beginning. Hocus Pocus, well, yeah, it's really fun to watch the whole thing. There were multiple people in our group who hadn't seen the first, 5 minutes of the movie, because it's always just on TV, and you don't rewind.
Yeah, and, well, I mean, going back to Marvel, I can't watch Infinity Wars because I haven't seen, 3 or 4 of the other films, and they're related to it.
They are, but if you pick one character and only watch the movies that character has witnessed, then you're good. I went in with the same knowledge as Ant-Man, which wasn't a lot, because he's been stuck in a car for a while.
I do actually like Ant-Man. He's my favorite.
He's so funny.
Of the Marvel movies, just because he was a breath of fresh air compared to all the others.
Very much so. And I kind of want to say that the Three Witches were also something of a breath of fresh air as far as Disney villains. Because up until this point, a lot of the Disney villains, while they would have humorous parts, they were not comedians.
Yeah, and on top of that, they had a grander scale of what they wanted to do. These three just want to suck the lives out of children.
And honestly, I think if there had been another route for them to be immortal, they would have taken that one too.
They had a route, though. We've talked about this. The very end of the movie where she only wants to kill this one child because she called her ugly. Whereas...
So petty.
They have the book... They have a bunch of zombie children outside.
Hundreds of zombie children.
They have 2 caged up that are going to die anyways.
Poor Ice. I feel so bad for Ice. He just had bad friends.
No, he's a dipshit.
Yeah, he was. But yeah, so I will say though that a lot of the other Disney villains, they definitely have bigger, grander schemes than just being immortal. Mm-hmm. Most of the time it involves ruling something somewhere. I don't know, the tri-state area. But if they're not on world domination, conquest, that sort of thing, they are constantly actively trying to kill something to meet their end goal. Mm-hmm. Whereas these kids are just, unfortunately, that's the only goal, is to be forever. And you happen to be the closest target at that time, until we get Idiot.
Well... They're trying to kill something.
They definitely trying to kill something.
You said there was no murder in this movie. They die in the very beginning.
Yeah, this is true. But I think that these are probably some of my favorite Disney villains because the fact that they are fully comedic all the time. They don't have this world domination complex. They just really want to live forever as all witches in, the magical witch land of Disney. Even
nowadays with modern medicine, organ transplants, and creating artificial organs.
Yeah. So, and on top of that, they have a flaw that isn't something, built into their magic system that backfires. Like the Little Mermaid. Where she got so big she just got stabbed by a boat. There's so many boats in the ocean, lady!
Yeah.
I feel like you could have seen that one coming. No, these ones just got petty. And that's a perfectly good reason for them to have been killed.
And maybe that's one thing that makes this movie so endearing, is that all the characters aren't these perfect personifications of your standard Disney hero, heroine, or villain.
And the other thing I will give this credit for, especially because it is a 90s Disney film. 90s Disney films has a really bad habit of making the parents either complete idiots or non-existent. And both of these parents were just kind of normal parents. They assumed that the older brother was watching the little kid. He is definitely, by 90s standards, old enough to be doing that.
Yeah.
I'm sure nowadays, with all of the murders, maybe no. But back then, that's what you did as an older kid. That's just kind of what you got to do.
Well...
It was Halloween. Everyone trick-or-treats back then. No one seems to trick-or-treat anymore. I don't know. Maybe that's just where we live. Very disappointed. But, that was kind of... you expected your neighbors to watch your kids while they trick-or-treated. The older brothers got them. They're going to go to their party. And all of their, interactions with their kids were not oh, we're best friends. It was no, that's a pretty bad dad joke.
And at the same time, this is kind of the tail end of the latchkey generation.
Definitely.
And part of that is due to the sensationalization of news and how much access we have to it now. Whereas, back in the day, we'd hear, oh, someone shot a couple people 3 or 4 states over. Yeah. That's not our problem.
There was a lot of not our problem back then. Yeah.
And now we're all activists. We're armchair activists.
Well, and on top of that, I think recent days, we've seen a lot. We've gotten access to horrific crimes that have happened closer to home that probably have always been happening. But now we know. Example being, we found out about a murder that happened in this very apartment complex.
Yes.
And, like, several of us have lived here over the time. You are the last one standing. Good job.
Yeah.
And none of us had known about it until a different friend who had also lived in town informed all of us about this murder that we all then Googled and immediately were like, oh my god!
We were so excited.
Yeah.
We were hoping not to say that... It wasn't a murder. It was a suicide. It was a very suspicious suicide.
Very suspicious.
But at the same time, not suspicious enough where, like...
It's definitely not an open case, I don't think.
No.
I think the police have definitely closed this one. I, as my armchair detective, would like to imagine that there is more going on. But at the same time, especially if you're a parent, because I think your mind shift definitely changes once you have your own kids to worry about. Hearing that something like that happened in your own apartment complex as opposed to 3 states over, that's, I think, part of the reason why trick-or-treat's not a big deal down here anymore. Now it's trunk-or-treat at church, where supposedly you know everyone, and it's a smaller venue, and you can physically see your kids all the time.
Well, and I had that for a good chunk of my life, mainly because of the locations we lived, because there wasn't... Germany and Italy don't celebrate Halloween the way Americans do.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, and even then, when I was younger, when we were in Alaska, I had snow, like 2 to 3 feet of snow.
Like, you guys build trick-or-treating snowmen?
I was a fish and a dinosaur and a knight.
Wow, so creative. I have no room to talk. I was a black cat for like 10 years in a row because the costume was so easy.
Well, that was part of it too, and on top of that, they were big, poofy costumes, so they kept us warm.
I will say, kids nowadays have it very nice with global warming, because when I was a kid, Halloween was cold. Like,
yeah.
Even though I have not moved very far, like, there were many Halloweens where your cute little Power Rangers costume would not have been warm enough.
No.
You would have had to wear a coat underneath that.
And, actually, there was a lady down the road in Alaska where every Halloween she dressed as a witch. And she had the creepiest smile. I know I was afraid of her. But at the same time, like, it was so cool. Like, I love that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah. And I don't think the Halloween culture is necessarily going away. If anything, I think people like Halloween more, like, as the years progress. Because, you know, we were all spooky kids at one point, and now we're all spooky adults who want other people to also be spooky. So...
Why make you guys watch stuff you would never watch normally?
Or, like, even our friend whose normal taste in movies consists of, like, classics and some love romance and some history dramas. Even she is like, oh, it's Halloween, time to break out my 3 scary movies and hope for trick-or-treaters.
Does she even have scary movies?
We watch Halloween Town every year.
That is not a scary movie.
I'm gonna make her watch...
I have not seen it, and I know it's not a scary movie.
It's not. I'm also gonna make her watch Monster House this year. A House Eats Children.
Yeah.
That one's on the verge of scary just because the CGI wasn't super great.
But it's enjoyable.
It is very enjoyable. We might get around to, like, Coraline or something.
I feel that would be pushing it a little bit.
I think she could do it.
Yeah.
But, so even people who are normally not into it, like, there's definitely Halloween spirit, and it's definitely staying up longer and longer, despite the fact that Christmas keeps moving forward through the months.
I think I was already seeing advertisements for Christmas crap.
Walmart already has Christmas trees up. But, on to the thing I know you truly want to talk about.
Yes.
Actual Salem.
Yes.
Real death.
So... I was talking with Elliot about this yesterday. We were looking up the statistics.
Yes.
The American witch trials are not even 1% of the European witch trials.
Which is hilarious, because I was watching a BBC thing where they definitely accused us of being a little bit more brutal.
No.
Someone's in denial.
Depending on your estimate, the largest one we saw, which is what we used, they estimated in like a 150-year time frame, they murdered, or not necessarily murdered, 80... 80,000 people died because of it. Because people died in prison. Some weren't actually tried. And here's the thing. We calculated it. It's about 500 people a year.
Ooh, that's a lot of people for back then.
Well,
we didn't have that many people roaming around. We got to stop murdering
Europe had like 80 million people at that time frame.
True. They were a little more densely populated.
Yeah. Our scale of like how many people are on the earth back in medieval times is a lot larger than we like to believe. We like to believe, oh, there were these little communities. There was millions of people on the earth.
Which, honestly, like, if you think logically about it, does make sense, because all the time in history they'd be like, oh, well, if you wanted that thing, you had to go to the next town over. It took them forever to get there. Well, yeah, because they were walking.
Well, we also looked at that, too. Because where the trials actually happened, I don't think it was considered Salem. It was in Ipswich.
All the way to Ipswich, huh?
Yes. Heavily referencing H.P. Lovecraft. But we looked at it, and it was like a 4 or 5 hour walk between the two in modern times.
Yeah.
But still, even if you have that direct road, that's still half a day of your travel.
Well, and back then, half a day, like we have a hard time taking off a half day from our normal 9-to-5 desk job. Imagine me like, well, I gotta feed all the chickens before 4 a.m. so I can walk all the way to Ipswich and back.
And that's the thing, is some of our coworkers do have farms.
I know. I have no idea how they managed to get everything done. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But, like, it doesn't ever sound very far, but they are very close together. Mm-hmm. It's just, you had other stuff to do than visit Ipswich.
Like, accuse your neighbors of being a witch, because they were all of this started because they were petty over a preacher, and this is from my brief reading of it, because unfortunately that book came in yesterday. There was a preacher who wanted more pay, and they were divided between should he and shouldn't he.
Well, and then something that I think we're talking about the same preacher. So one of the first people who was accused was a slave woman, who, if I'm not mistaken, was his slave. And she was the only one who according to the books, actually confessed to being in league with the devil or Satan or whatever. But we're pretty sure that's because, like, he beat that out of her.
Yeah.
That sucks.
On top of that, of the people who was accused of being a witch, she was the one who lived, because what happened with her? She was sold back because she wasn't considered like a citizen or something.
It was something very strange and demeaning.
But he wouldn't even pay her prison fees, because back then you had to pay for everything. If you wanted food, if you wanted new hay, and he didn't want to pay for any of the fees she racked up. So someone else bought her, and she got
to go free, huh?
Be enslaved somewhere else, I guess, which...
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that I noticed while doing this research, and it wasn't an exclusive thing, but a good majority of the people accused all happened to be people that were not well into the society.
That was the first three.
Yeah.
Because it was the slave girl, it was the street woman who was pregnant, and it was the not so pious woman, or something like that.
And she was elderly too. Mm-hmm. And then I think the street woman, there was, and this I might be off on this, but I think from my research, I came to understand that there was this woman, the street woman was probably mentally handicapped to some extent.
Possibly.
So, we're just going for a minority bingo over here.
I think that's what Ask a Mortician said.
Yeah. She was a very helpful source for this while I was working.
Hers was exactly what I read on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Except her telling of where like stuff was more informed than Wikipedia's page.
I did appreciate her video because I had I haven't been to Salem, and especially since I did watch the documentary from the History Channel a little while ago about this. And by all fairness, I understand why they didn't. Mm-hmm. But you don't see a whole lot of photos of, like, the actual hanging place, or where theoretically the bodies were dumped, or where the trials were held. Because A, those are older places. B, I'm pretty sure a Walgreens parking lot is paved over one of the locations.
So they believe.
I mean, but still, like, even if that's like, oh, that's so we believe, like, from a History Channel point of view, I can totally understand why they aren't going to, like, try and, like, be like, and where are you standing? A major corporation's parking lot. I get it. It's also not sexy shots.
No.
And even the other places that I then Googled to be like, oh, well, where were these other places that it could have been?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not like there's anything super awesome to, like, film and, like, get people hyped up about from a documentary maker's point of view. I mean, it's a
the
hill.
town's changed so much.
The town has changed immensely. It's a hill with some trees on it now. Like, oh boy.
Yeah, which I guess they're leading, or they're planning to make a memorial for them.
Which I think is very nice.
Yeah.
Especially because, like, I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to do what Hocus Pocus has done and make the witches into something a little bit more fun and relaxed. But at the same time, we don't want to forget that as horrible as it was, we did do this. This was a thing that happened.
If you're wanting something more realistic and believable, go watch The Witch, for example, where they did a good job. And there's one I do want to get to at some point called Haxan.
Yeah. I know the name has floated around.
It's called Haxan, The History of Witchcraft, I believe. And it's this old German film that's a pseudo-documentary / part fiction about it, so...
Yeah, you know, part fiction makes everything more interesting.
Old silent movies.
Yes. And I will say that Hocus Pocus definitely, for the most part, does throw out the actual tragedies out the window to an extent. But I think they do so with the understanding that the adults in the room will know what is going on and the history behind it, and that for the kids, it's not something for them to yet have to grasp. So I don't think the movie did a bad job in neglecting that. Like, I think it would have been very odd for them to be like, we're so sorry for the witch trials.
The witches are enjoyable, but they are scary at what they can actually do.
Yeah, and I do think that the way that they represent the parts of the history portion, especially in the flashback at the beginning, I don't think it was out of character or out of place, because they do show that, like, these 3 women were tried. We know in this movie that they are definitely witches, and definitely in league with the devil.
Oh yeah, they greet a man dressed as a very comical Satan.
Very comical Satan, who apparently his wife's dog is more powerful than 3 witches. That was a little terrifying to me.
I mean, some little dogs are terrifying.
Very scary small dog. And so the fact that the movie does, to an extent, address it, because they are hanged at the beginning. Granted, it is made very clear to all the children that they are not actually dead. Calm down. They are very bad.
They'll come back.
And they are also definitely the bad guy. And in Disney World, while death is frowned upon, bad guy death is less frowned upon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most of the classics, unfortunately, the bad guy does die.
But it's almost a justified death at that point.
Yeah, and I think this one handles it similarly. Granted, you know, the original trials, arguably, none of this was justified.
No.
I'm sure there's probably 1 or 2 instances where someone was doing something wrong, and this is just the way that they managed to get them. But that doesn't balance out the scales.
They were already feuding before that shit happened.
Exactly.
I have no sympathy for them a little bit, just because, like, the original 3 victims, I feel sorry for, and one of the husband of one of the people who was Dorkly.
Oh yeah, so one of the characters came to our attention that we're not 100% sure what her name is.
Her name is Dorothy.
She's dead now. She can't tell me otherwise.
All historical record says her name was Dorothy. The magistrate wrote her name Dorkly.
I would like very much to assume that at some point her name was Dorothy, and then the school bullies changed it to Dorkly, and now even the teachers call her this.
Well, her dad, so she and her mom were one of the victims.
Yes.
He was the guy who was crushed to death.
Oh, the one who refused to confess.
Which I learned what exactly they did, and his was more excruciating than the other 2, because part of it, for them to actually be called witches, they had to confess to begin with.
Yeah.
And
back then, confessing was a little bit looser term than it is now.
And so what they did is they put him between 2 planks and just piled heavier and heavier rocks on him for 2 days.
Apparently the only thing he ever said was more weight, too. He never confessed to anything.
Yeah, no. he wasn't playing along with them. And then after that, there was one more turning point where, so supposedly one of the earlier victims was this woman who, she was Celtic and only knew Gaelic. And so she couldn't recite the Lord's Prayer, which supposedly
was kind of your loophole.
Witches couldn't say the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah.
And then this one man that they set up to hang on, and this is ballsy as all hell, noose around his neck, recites the Lord's Prayer verbatim. And the people start, oh, he's not a witch, and they're going to get him. And the magistrate or whoever was in charge is like, no, he's in league with the devil. He's using some magic to make us think or some shit like that.
Yes.
And they hung him. And that was the turning point against the powers that be.
Ballsy.
But it took 19 people for them to realize this. And I've also learned that the theory about the ergot.
Yeah.
That's been heavily discredited because if it was more people would have been affected.
Yeah.
And people would have actually died from it.
Yeah. Yeah, fair point.
Yeah. What did I learn? I think LSD or acid. Some drug is actually based off the ergot hallucinogenic
Good
properties.
to know.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, and the witch trials were kind of weird too, because from what I can tell, it was a lot of mostly finger pointing, he said, she said.
Yes. No, that's exactly what it was.
Which, even back then, they knew made for horrible trials. Because even back then, you were supposed to have some kind of evidence to back up your he said.
Well, part of it too is they had more not only did they have witnesses, they had witnesses in the crowd. So like they'd be on trial and the person would start talking, "Oh, there's pins in my hair. He's put pins in my hair."
Yes, the old pins in my hair spell.
Yeah. He turned me into a newt.
Yes.
I got better.
Which, as hilarious as that line is from Monty Python, I kind of think that might be a fairly accurate representation of how this stuff went down. Which, nowadays, we laugh and are like, wow, how stupid can people be? But at the same time, like, this was, like, whoever was doing this at the time, this was kind of their way of getting what they wanted. Be damned who's in the way.
Yeah. And I mean, we still see stuff like this. That's why,
unfortunately,
that's why we call it a witch hunt.
This is true. This is true.
Sharks.
Yes.
If one person dies from a shark, we go out and slaughter as many as we can.
At least sharks are truly magical.
They're terrifying.
They are terrifying. They have lots of pointy teeth.
So, we've talked a lot about the history of our very brief understanding of the history of Salem.
Yes.
And, I mean, we love this movie. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, for sure.
But what would you rate this movie?
That's a hard question, because there is a nostalgia goggle problem with this movie. Even without the nostalgia goggles, though, I would say this is well above the halfway point in my movie watching love scale. I probably put it like a 7. Mostly because, I love it for Halloween. It is a perfect Halloween movie. It's got all the elements. You got your black cats, you got your cemeteries, you got your zombies, you got your witches, got your trick-or-treating. Covers all your bases, no problem. But the rest of the year, I kind of forget this movie's around. Which is too bad. I love this movie. My standards for loving movies is real low. But I would say that maybe outside of the context of Halloween, this movie doesn't shine quite as much.
And maybe that's the point of it, too, is that this is specifically a Halloween movie.
Definitely.
It's meant to be a special movie to watch. Like, for my brother, his favorite movie's Hot Rod. He had to stop watching it because it started becoming not so special for him. Now he watches it every year on his birthday.
There you go. Or a good example would also be like most Christmas movies. They are all, for the most part, not good movies, but you watch them every year because they are a Christmas movie, and during Christmas time, they suddenly are much better. Yeah.
It's the magic of the season.
It is.
And there is something to that, I feel.
Definitely. And so I think while this movie realistically gets a 7, it gets a hands down must watch it at Halloween from me.
Honestly, when I have nephews and nieces, they're going to watch this movie.
Definitely.
I love this movie. It does rank, I would say, if giving it an overall year frame, like if I watch it any time of the year, I'd give it a good 6 out of 10.
Yeah.
I would definitely go back and rewatch it. I wish we had DVDs that had more to them other than
yeah,
widescreen being the special feature.
We discovered that literally all of our copies of this movie are the exact same copy.
Or they're the VHS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoops.
But I would definitely recommend this movie to people.
Definitely. And if you like this movie, there's also a pretty great documentary with the original cast talking about their roles and what they did and how they loved it and how they made the movie. So if you like this movie, that documentary is actually pretty worthwhile. Okay.
Yeah, I unfortunately didn't get around to it because
we were busy.
We were busy, and Halloween for me is I try and watch a horror movie every single night, so...
Impressive.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. Hitting up some old 80s gore fest and then some old classics that I haven't got around to. So
I love a good classic.
Anywho, this has been The Good, the Bad, and the Weird.
Thanks for listening.
Peace.